I squeeze the gas till my clip is empty. Till my clip is empty. I squeeze the gas till my clip is empty. I squeeze the gas till my clip is empty.
This video is sponsored by no one. But let's actually talk about video game preservation. Now, unlike film preservation, video game preservation is a completely different can of worms. Compared to film preservation, where the studio isn't too interested to release it, they send it off to a boutique label like Criterion, Kino Lorber, Vinegar Syndrome, Arrow Video, Shout Factory, and many other labels. With video games, there are times companies would actually re-release one of their older titles on a modern platform. Sometimes with good results, and sometimes... I don't need to say anything about you, but that doesn't mean that there are labels out there that would re-release older games. There are companies like Big Limited Run Games that actually re-releases various older games and port them into modern platforms. Or to put it simply, too afraid to emulate a simple old-ass game? Boom, boom, boom.
Give me $200.
Okay, I have nothing against ports / collections like these, because one of my favorite things are ports of older games and re-releases in a collection. And again, sometimes they're good, and sometimes... Get the fuck out of my face! But if there's a good thing about these ports and re-releases, at least it actually gives people exposure to a title that they either missed out on or never heard of. And of course, the most important thing is to support the developers and the entire team who worked on the game. But if there's one thing that movies and games have in common, is that our good old friend Special Distance Syndrome is waiting outside at the door. There are many examples of Special Distance Syndrome in games. One of the most famous ones is the Resident Evil Director's Cut and its Clown Fart soundtrack. Many other people already talked about this in better detail, but all you need to know is that the composer actually pretended to be deaf for his entire life until in 2013 when many people found out that he was faking it. But let's talk about a certain other horror gaming franchise that actually has gotten Special Distance Syndromed, well, even worse than the Clown Fart music in Resident Evil Director's Cut. And that game is Silent Hill 2. Now, it is a well-known fact that Silent Hill 2 is regarded as the best survival horror game of all time, and also the best of the Silent Hill series. In terms from its story, its gameplay, its characters, its music, pretty much the entirety of the game is loved. And for a while, the game was only released in 3 platforms: the PS2, the OG Xbox, and the PC. The PS2 version is actually the version that many people first think of when they think of Silent Hill 2, and it's also the one that's the most expensive of the 3. The OG Xbox version is actually slightly even better than the PS2 version. It actually contains content that's actually exclusive to it, and prices for this version kind of vary. Sometimes it could be cheap, sometimes it could be, man, I really need to pay that house payment. And then there's the PC version, which is even rarer than the PS2 version, and also that one listing of the OG Xbox version. However, when the PC version first came out, it was very buggy. But however, if you want to play Silent Hill 2 without breaking the bank, there are several ways. The first method is, well, emulation. The PS2 emulator, PC6X2, was able to play this game perfectly with no issues, whether if you either use the old prehistoric version or the Giga Chad Nightly version. But the OG Xbox version, you can actually use the OG Xbox emulator Zemu to play it, although you still have to do some tinkering with this particular version since Zemu is a very picky emulator. But if you don't want to emulate, well, there is actually a way to actually play them in real hardware. For PS2 users, you can either A. mod chip the PS2 to play a burned backup of the game, or B. make or buy yourself a free McBoot card and use a few apps that would actually be useful to play backup copies of the game. There's ESR, where you pretty much have to patch the DVD ISO of the game to be able to run it without using any disk swap methods. And there's OPL, where you pretty much can launch games with the use of a USB stick or a hard drive. Though you do need a hard drive have adapter or network adapter in order if you want to play the game through the hard drive. For OG Xbox users, if you have either a hard or soft modded Xbox, you can either burn the game through a DVD-R or install it on your OG Xbox's hard drive. And if you have an Xbox 360, JTAG or not, well congrats, because the game is actually backwards compatible. But if you ask me what is the definitive way to play Silent Hill 2, well that answer would be Silent Hill the Enhanced Edition. A group of talented, hardworking fans that actually decided to fix up the old PC port and actually make it the definitive version of Silent Hill 2. And if you want to get into Silent Hill 2, I honestly recommend this version the most. The PC version is basically abandonware and you can find it with a simple search. It works perfectly fine if you have a powerful enough PC or even the Steam Deck. And I'll have a link in the description to download the mod if you want to play the game yourself. However, I left out one more version of Silent Hill 2, and that is the version that was in the HD collection for Xbox 360 and PS3. And out of all the versions of Silent Hill 2, this is the worst version. This collection was handled by Hygiene Studios, which their previous work for Konami consists of Frogger Returns and Karaoke Revolutionary Glee. Out of all the frickin' people, they chose the motherfuckers that did Karaoke Revolution Glee to make an HD collection of Silent Hill. Man, Konami, no wonder why people hate you. Well, if you want to know why this collection was made, it was made around the time when several games were getting remastered on the PS3, including Konami's own Metal Gear Solid. However, the Metal Gear collection was actually done with love and support, and time and effort, whereas Silent Hill HD collection, on the other hand...
This is cool!
Now, there's a few things I have to address about the HD collection. One thing is that Team Silent, the people who were involved with the Silent Hill series, actually got disbanded by Konami. And Konami lost the source code for the original versions of Silent Hill 2 and 3. So in its place, Konami gave Hygiene Studios, a studio that isn't literally familiar with the Silent Hill series, the unfinished betas of Silent Hill 2 and 3 as their main source code for the HD collection. And it was done in a hurry, which is honestly also one of the reasons why this version was bad. But I mean, hey, it's been like, what, 12 years since this HD collection has been out, and I think Konami might have changed a bit. In fact, they're actually doing a remake of Silent Hill 2, and I wonder what's that gonna look like. Yeah, just stick with the Enhanced Edition done by fans. Fuck you, Konami. I'm done with your shit. And if you're someone who's a fan of Silent Hill 3, well, you have to use Project Reload and download a few things to get the PC port up and running and making it the Enhanced Edition. Although if you're a Steam Deck user, well, just emulate the original PS2 version. But let's talk about a certain other Japanese game studio that has most of their re-releases of their older titles kind of a mixed bag. And this company is well known for having a blue rat that goes really fast, and that company is Sega! Now when it comes to Sega re-releasing one of their older titles, and not just only the Genesis games, I mean mainly stuff after the Genesis, sometimes it can be good, and sometimes it could be caca-mierda. But I feel like for Sega's other games, I feel like I would save them for another video.
Well, this sucks.
So for this particular video, we're mainly going to be focusing on our favorite little blue bastard, Sonic. Starting with the original Genesis games. Now, it is stupidly easy to play the original Genesis games. You go to your search engine of choice, find the games, play it on an emulator, and bam, you're already set. But before the mess that was Sonic Origins, you were able to actually legally buy the Sonic Genesis ROMs directly from Sega on Steam, which you can either play it through Sega's own Genesis emulator, which it's really caca-mierda, or you could play it on a way better emulator. It was actually really nice that Sega actually allowed fans to actually buy the Sonic ROMs directly from them, but then Sonic Origins came in and then they delisted it all altogether on Steam. I mean, you can still get the ROMs, obviously not directly from Sega, but still, it's nice to at least try to support the actual developers of the game. But before Sonic Origins, there were several other ways to play the original Sonic games in a collection. Starting with Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn. Sonic Jam came out in 1997 for the Sega Saturn, and it's actually kind of a neat little collection. It has the old Genesis games from Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. You can even use the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge to play Sonic 3 fully complete, and put Sonic 2 to play Knuckles in Sonic 2, and put Sonic 1 to play the Blue Spears if you want. And the thing about Sonic 1 is that it has the option to have the spin dash in Sonic 1, which is actually pretty neat. Though playing the Genesis games, it does have a few sound issues, and I don't know if it's because I'm using an emulator, but I don't know what. Just take a listen. mean, it doesn't sound that bad, but I have heard worse though. But aside from that, the games do play perfectly fine on the Sega Saturn. But what really makes this collection shine is the whole Sonic world. This is a fully 3D hub world that contains lots of special features. It contains several art galleries that depicts on either characters, artwork from the Genesis through the Saturn era, a sound room where you get to listen to a lot of the music from the Genesis games and alongside with the sound effects, a Hall of Fame which is pretty much a history of Sonic at the time, to even a little movie theater that contains a bunch of videos. The videos included consist of the opening and ending of Sonic CD, with both Toot Toot Sonic Warrior and Believe in Yourself playing in the background. This is actually also one of the first few times American players actually heard the Japanese soundtrack of Sonic CD before the Christian Whitehead version. But don't worry, we'll get there until we get there. Another thing that Americans didn't get until a few years later is the trailer of the Sonic OVA. The Sonic OVA was already out in Japan, and we didn't get the OVA until a few years later in September 7th of 1999, 2 days before the release of Sonic Adventure 1 and the Sega Dreamcast. Well hey, at least Americans actually did have a glimpse of the Sonic OVA thanks to this little trailer included in Sonic Jam, and then eventually, when it finally came out, it was released on VHS and then DVD. I'm still kinda upset that we're not getting a Blu-ray of this anytime soon. Aside from the trailer of the Sonic OVA, there's also a little short film called Sonic Man of the Year, or just Sonic the Animation. This short was done by TMS Entertainment, and it follows Dr. Eggman being pissed off that Sonic was Man of the Year, so in order to get revenge, he decided to dress up as Sonic and flog him for being Worst Man of the Year. This is a funny little short, although it ends with a to be continued cliffhanger, and knowing Sonic with cliffhanger endings, it always never follows up. Next is the Sonic Ride, or just Sonic Ride, and from the looks of it, it feels like kind of a 3D concept of a virtual reality Sonic ride, but the ride never happened, which was honestly the reason why this video was actually unreleased until Sonic Jam. And the rest of the videos consist of Japanese commercials from the Genesis era, from Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, Sonic CD, Sonic Spinball, and also the Game Gear games. Aside from that, there's a little mission mode that you can do where you can get to collect as many rings with Sonic, go through various checkpoints that are either blue or red, fly around with Tails, and a bunch of other things. Overall, Sonic Jam is a nice little collection for the Saturn, and also the whole Sonic world is just a fun 3D playground, and honestly this collection feels like a nice little goodbye to the Genesis era for Sonic, and then eventually for the following year we get to see Sonic Adventure, Sonic's first proper 3D game. But if you're a Sonic fan, I highly recommend checking out Sonic Jam, not just only to just play the Genesis games, but also to check out a lot of the extras and check out Sonic World. This and Christmas with Sonic are both fun early attempts of Sonic being in 3D way before the adventure games. But is it really worth $40 to frickin' $310?
No.
But if you really want to play Sonic Jam, well, there are several ways. You can either emulate the game, which is what I did, and the fact that Saturn emulators have recently been improving for the past few years, and it's actually a really good thing. But if you have a Sega Saturn laying around, you can actually use either A, a mod chip, if these particular mod chips would ever get restocked, or B, a card reader, which you can either actually have it installed into the disk drive, or one that's used specifically for the cartridge RAM adapter. Doing these would definitely save lots of time and also lots of money. Oh yeah, there was also a version of this game released on the Gamecom, but nobody played that piece of shit. I mean, the only good use of the Gamecom is pretty much hitting someone with the back of the head with it. Let's talk about another Sonic collection that actually was one that I personally grew up with, and that is Sonic Mega Collection. Sonic Mega Collection was originally exclusive for the GameCube release in 2002, but then a following year later it came out on the PS2, OG Xbox, and then PC. Unlike Sonic Jam, where it had a cool 3D playground as a hub world to access the extras, Sonic Mega Collection tried to do something a bit different, and honestly, it doesn't look that bad. In terms of games they included, the basics are here: Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. Well, Sonic 3 separately with Sonic and Knuckles, because the thing about this game is that if you want to play Sonic 3 fully complete, alongside with Knuckles and Sonic 2 and the Blue Spears, you have to beat the games in a certain amount of times, and then eventually you will manage to unlock them. But aside from the usual games, there are also a few games that didn't make it to Sonic Jam, like Sonic 3D Blast, which makes sense, that game was already released on the Sega Saturn, and Sonic Spinball, which... Okay, if you really want to have a great Sonic pinball game, just play the pinball stages in Sonic Adventure 1, they're really fucking fun and addictive. There's also Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which... Okay, people already know what this game is. It's Puyo Poop. There's also a few unlockable games like Flicky for the Sega Genesis, which is actually a port of the classic Sega arcade game from 1984. And there's actually two ways to actually unlock it. You can either play Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for 30 times, or if you have a save of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, you'll actually unlock it way more easily. Another game that's included that's also unlockable is Rystar, and the way you have to unlock it is by... Play Blue Spears, Knuckles and Sonic 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Flicky 30 times each. Whew, Jesus Christ. There's also two other unlockable games, Comic Zone and The Ooze. However, these two were only in the Japanese version, so before you start going, oh my god, I can't wait to play Comic Zone and The Ooze and Sonic Mega Collection, well, you can't. You have to import the Japanese version, or play it on Dolphin. And if you're wondering, the games play perfectly fine on the GameCube, and in terms of sound issues, there's barely any sound issues. I mean, then again, this is before Sega decided to let a company called Fat Games to make shitty plug-and-plays with their games. Now, in terms of extras, there's a few extras included in Sonic Mega Collection. Well, mainly artwork this time around, since compared to Sonic Jam where it had shitloads of videos, this only had a few videos, but we'll get to the videos in a bit. One of the major extras is actually looking at the covers from the Sonic Archie comics, which we can see the whole evolution of this comic being like, haha, look, a cute little fun comic series with Sonic and his friends, to then Sonic the Hedgehog, a drama series, premiering tonight at 8 on AMC. Sponsored by Popeye's new lawsuit flavored chicken tenders.
Love that chicken.
There's also a few art pieces from the Genesis and even Adventure era at the time. And it too has its fair share of videos. Not as much as compared to, let's say, Sonic Jam, but there's some few familiar things, like the Sonic CD opening and ending, but this time with the American music. And the rest of the videos were videos that were showcased in the World Hobby Fair in Japan in 2002. Most of these include a trailer for Sonic Advance 2, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, and it has its own history with Sonic, which is probably my favorite history with Sonic. It showcased the abundance of history of Sonic from the Genesis era, and hell, it even includes Sonic Jam as a nice little entry. And then it ends with a nice little teaser of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle coming out the next month. Another thing you could also check out is the manuals, which is actually something that I first mentioned that you can actually do in Sonic Jam, and overall the whole collection itself is not that bad. And probably one of my favorite aspects of this collection is probably the music. Sonic games, whether they're either good or bad, always tend to have good music. Even me, right? No, Sonic Forces, your music sounds like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Oh. But overall, Mega Collection itself, no matter what platform you play it on, is a nice little collection and a massive improvement over Sonic Jam, but still, both Mega Collection and Sonic Jam are both good on their own rights. After Sonic Mega Collection, there were several other collections that came out afterwards. There was Sonic Gems Collection, which pretty much have more of the rarer Sonic games like Sonic the Fighters, Sonic R, and also Sonic CD. Sonic Classic Collections is pretty much Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles ported to the DS. And we have Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, which the name implies it's more of a Sega Genesis collection since it has other Genesis games that isn't just Sonic. But still, Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles are still represented in here. Now, all these collections are great for their own right, and you already know that I've been praising both Sonic Jam and Mega Collection. But if you ask me my go-to way to actually play the original Genesis games, well, surprisingly, it's actually not these collections. My actual genuine go-to way to actually play the original Sonic Genesis games is definitely, hands down, the retro engine ports developed by Christian Whitehead and Stealth. Starting with Sonic CD in 2011, to then Sonic 1 and 2 in 2013, These ports are basically considered as the definitive way to play the original Sonic Genesis games, especially Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. As for Sonic CD, the port itself is not bad, but Sonic CD itself is, well...
Peace.
Okay, not to shit on Sonic CD, it does have a good soundtrack for both the US and the Japanese soundtrack. And plus, this port done by Christian Whitehead and Stealth is just pretty much fantastic, and it is definitely the best way to actually experience the game without shelling the money for a freaking Sega CD. Unfortunately, you can't get this version on Steam anymore, but you can still get this version on the Google Play Store, but we'll talk about this in a bit. But what made these ports stand out the most is basically all the enhancements that Christian Whitehead and Stealth actually put into these games. There's the obvious one, like having the games in widescreen, being able to play as Tails and Knuckles in Sonic 1, the Spin Dash in Sonic 1 and also the Sonic 2 Spin Dash in Sonic CD, which is way better than the CD Spin Dash, and the inclusion of the lost level in Sonic 2 Hidden Palace Zone, which is a pretty nice touch. However, of the 3 ports, Sonic CD is the only one that managed to have several other ports, like a version of the Xbox 360, the PS3, and of course the one on mobile. Whereas Sonic 1 and 2, the only way to play them outside of mobile is probably by the use of BlueStacks, which is an application that allows you to run Android apps on your PC. But then, sometime in January 2021, 2 people known as Rubber Ducky Cooley and Chuli decided to make a decompilation of Sonic 1 and 2 to work natively on PC, which then led to another group of devs to use their decompilation to build Sonic 1 Forever and Sonic 2 Absolute. These are considered as straight up the best way to experience the retro engine ports of Sonic 1 and 2 on PC, and it really shows. They even add more enhancements to these games, like the Super Peel Out from Sonic CD, the Drop Dash from Sonic Mania, a Sonic 3-esque save feature, mod support. Hell, you can even play the Nickelodeon arcade version of Sonic 2. There are so many enhancements. Hell, you can even play as Amy in Sonic 1, which if you're someone who really likes Amy, this is really up your alley. Now these 3 ports are all nice, but what about Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Well, Sonic 3 was gonna get a retro engine port released on mobile alongside with Sonic 1 and 2, but Sega at the time rejected the idea due to the whole legal issue of Michael Jackson and a few other people being the composers of Sonic 3. Which I kinda find bullshit, since around the time when they were doing the port, Sonic 3 was available already on Steam and Xbox Live Arcade. But this isn't the first time Sega had an issue with this before. You see, in 1997, the same year as Sonic Jam, Sega made a release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the PC called the Sonic 3 and Knuckles Collection. It's pretty much a bare bones port of Sonic 3 and Knuckles ported to PC, although there's one catch. The entire game's soundtrack has been changed to MIDI. And do I mean the entire game's soundtrack? Well, not exactly. Because some of the songs, most notably Carnival Night Zone, Ice Cap Zone, Launch Base Zone, Knuckles' theme, and the competition menu and the credits theme, were all replaced by the versions that were used in the prototype of Sonic 3. Which, in the prototype itself, it doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like genuine Sonic music. Whereas in Sonic & Knuckles Collection, it just sounds poorly composed. But then again, the rest of the entirety of the game's soundtrack in this port just sounds completely bad. And I know that there is a mod out there to actually fix up this port and actually bring back the original music that was used in the final game. But however, there's already a good PC port of Sonic 3 out there. I mentioned this a few videos ago, but I'm mentioning it again, and that is Sonic 3 Angel Island Revisited, or simply Sonic 3 Air. Developed by Eukaryote sometime around 2018, this is pretty much a what if Sonic 3 actually did get a retro engine port, and it is just fantastic. It has a lot of the enhancements and quality of life features that the previous things I mentioned like Sonic Forever and Sonic 2 Absolute had. But this was before Sonic Forever and Sonic 2 Absolute were actually a thing, and honestly, this port of Sonic 3 is still impressive to this very day. And it is hands down the definitive way to play Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Sure, there was Sonic 3 Complete, which for a while many people considered that to be the definitive version of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Which, no disrespect to Sonic 3 Complete, it's good on its own right, but Sonic 3 Air is such a massive improvement, and of course, it's definitely the version of Sonic 3 many of us wanted for a long time. Now, playing Sonic Forever, Sonic 2 Absolute, and Sonic 3 Air is, well, pretty easy. For Sonic Forever and Sonic 2 Absolute, you need legal dump copies of the Android version of Sonic 1 and 2. That is, if you have an Android phone. Since to my knowledge, I don't know if iPhone users or iOS users can actually dump their versions from their iPhone. As for Sonic 3 Air, you needed the Sonic 3 and Knuckles ROM from Steam in order to get the game legally running, but of course, that version of Sonic 3 is no longer available on Steam. But luckily, Eukarya actually provided a list of several ways to obtain the Sonic 3 ROM legally from various sources. Which, since I'm on the topic, I might as well finally bring up Sonic Origins. Now, from what I've heard, Sonic Origins, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Now, when it first released, it was very buggy, it was very blurry, and it was overall a mess. But then it got an update that fixes most majority of the issues it had, and overall, it's decent. However, what isn't decent is what they did to Sonic 3. From what I heard, Sonic 1, 2, and CD play perfectly just fine on Sonic Origins. Whereas Sonic 3, on the other hand... Okay, to correct myself, the game actually does play perfectly fine in Sonic Origins, and Sega again used the prototype soundtrack, but again, it sounds poorly composed. Instead of using the actual music from the prototype, or just recreating it from a program like Devil Mask or Furnace, my assumption is that they just basically took the one that was from Knuckles' collection and basically recomposed it with a shitty Genesis sound font in FL Studio. In fact, most of the replacement prototype music actually sounds more like something out of Sonic 4 than it does of Sonic 3. This also happened again with Sonic Superstars, and you know, I'm not gonna talk about that. But of course, whenever there's an issue, fans come to the rescue. Just like the previous 3 games I mentioned, like Sonic 1 Forever, Sonic 2 Absolute, and Sonic 3 Air, Sonic Origins has a huge modding community out there that has abundance of mods and also abundance of fixes. The most famous one is the Sonic Origins Ultra Fix, which has over 360 changes that fixes pretty much the entirety of this collection, making it very playable. There's also mods out there that actually replace the music for Sonic 3 with either the proper prototype music or with the final game music. In order to run these mods, you need the Hedge Mod Manager, which is the same mod manager that is used for games like Sonic Generations. I honestly recommend it if you want to support the actual people who worked on Sonic Origins and also the people who actually worked on the original Genesis games. But at the same time, I prefer Sonic Forever, Sonic 2 Absolute, and Sonic 3 Air more. As for Sonic CD, well, if you still have the old Steam version, you're completely fine, but if you don't, then well, you had to play it through Sonic Origins. Or use a decomp that was also made by Rubber Ducky Cooley of the mobile version of Sonic CD. Where the hell's that damn Knuckles Chaotix milk? Now this is the part where I discuss Sonic Adventure DX and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, right? Well... yeah, instead of that, here's a list of mods of Sonic Adventure 2 that I honestly recommend, and the Sonic Adventure DX mod installer. We're gonna be going back to movies again to finally talk about our final subject of Special Distance Syndrome.